The morning light spilling through the tall courtroom windows did nothing to soften the tension already hanging in the air. People whispered, shuffled, checked their phones. Everyone sensed something unusual brewing. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses, preparing to begin the day's docket. When the double doors flew open with a sharp bang that froze the entire room, in walked the senator's daughter, wrapped in designer confidence, chin lifted like she owned the place. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't even slow down. She marched straight to the defendant's mark, tossing her hair with the kind of practiced entitlement that made even the officers glance at each other. Before the judge could introduce the case, she rolled her eyes so hard it seemed choreographed. "Let's just get this over with," she muttered loud enough for the crowd to hear. A few people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Judge Caprio.com, as ever, asked her to confirm her name for the record. She smirked. "You already know who I am," she said, waving her phone like a badge. "And I don't see why I should waste time on some petty fine. My dad'll take care of it." A ripple moved through the courtroom, a mix of gasps and stunned silence. She wasn't finished. Leaning back with dismissive arrogance, she added, "Honestly, I don't even know why an old man like you is still doing this job." The room went dead. Quiet. But what Judge Caprio did next would ripple across the entire country. What made the moment even heavier was the irony layered beneath it. Her father, the senator whose face appeared almost nightly on cable news, had built his entire brand on the values of discipline, accountability, and respect for institutions. He lectured the nation about personal responsibility, about how America needed to raise stronger, humbler citizens. And yet here was his daughter, standing in a public courtroom, shredding those principles with every careless word that fell from her lips. The contradiction was so sharp it felt like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting to see if anyone else would notice. But people already had. The senator's daughter wasn't a stranger to public controversy. She had become a sort of minor celebrity online, not for achievements or activism, but for a string of viral clips that showcased her entitlement berating store clerks, mocking school staff, bragging about privilege. Every time one of those videos surfaced, commenters wondered whether she would ever face a real consequence. Yet somehow, her father's influence always absorbed the blow, leaving her arrogance untouched. That's what made Judge Caprio's courtroom so different. His bench wasn't a stage for theatrics or power plays. It was a space known across the country for compassion, dignity, and simple human understanding. Millions adored him for it. His gentle voice, his patient questions, his insistence on seeing people, not case numbers, had turned his courtroom into a place where real stories mattered. So when someone walked in dripping with entitlement, especially someone connected to high political office, the contrast became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just another parking ticket, or another privileged kid rolling her eyes at a rule she didn't like. This moment was colliding with bigger conversations happening across America about who gets away with what, about fairness, about how power shields some while crushing others. People in the courtroom could feel it. Something about this clash, this collision of arrogance and integrity, carried the weight of a much larger truth waiting to break open. And as she crossed her arms and smirked, clearly convinced she would walk out untouched, no one in the room could have predicted just how wrong she was, and the entitlement was only beginning from the moment she was old enough to understand what her last name could buy. The senator's daughter learned that doors didn't just open for her, they swung wide before she even reached them. Her childhood was built on polished wood floors, private drivers, and vacations that looked like movie sets. The world around her adjusted to her moods, not the other way around. And every inconvenience that normal people had to navigate was edited out of her life before it ever touched her. If she broke something, someone else fixed it. If she crossed a line, someone else moved it. If she made a mistake, someone else absorbed it. Nothing ever stuck to her long enough to teach her anything by high school. She had already slipped into the rhythm of entitlement, moving through life with the casual assurance of someone who believed consequences were for other people. Clips of her attitude had already started surfacing by then, shaky phone footage of her mocking waiters, spittling teachers, belittling people who dared to enforce basic rules. "Relax," she said in one video when confronted for parking illegally. "It's not like those rules are meant for people like us." The smugness wasn't loud. It was effortless, like she didn't even realize how offensive the words were. She genuinely meant it. College didn't change her. If anything, it made her worse. There were interviews with student reporters where she smirked through questions about campus fairness, answering with dismissive quips that felt like taunts. There was a clip of her laughing as a campus officer tried to address a noise complaint, brushing him off with a bored wave. The comments under those videos always spiraled into debates, some blaming her youth, others pointing to her father's power, but most wondering what would happen if she ever faced someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought. That moment had never come. Her father's name was a shield far stronger than any law or rule she stumbled against. People backed down. Administrators reconsidered. Critics softened. Every headline that threatened to turn serious somehow dissolved before it grew teeth. She lived in a bubble of political immunity, and each time she dodged accountability. It only reinforced the illusion that she was untouchable, which is why her arrogance today wasn't performative, was instinctual. She wasn't acting entitled. She was simply being who the world had allowed her to become. The contrast between her worldview and Judge Caprio's was almost cinematic. Where he saw humanity, she saw hierarchy. Where he saw dignity, she saw inconvenience. Where he believed every person deserved fairness, she believed fairness was irrelevant to someone with her last name. So when she stepped into Caprio's courtroom, she genuinely believed she owned the place. Long before he became a symbol of compassion in an often cold judicial system, Judge Caprio was simply Francis, the son of hard-working immigrant parents who believed that dignity was a treasure no one could take from you. His father woke before dawn every morning, balancing 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and his mother stretched every dollar until it held the shape of hope. Their home was small, their resources limited, but the values they handed him were enormous. They taught him that titles meant nothing without integrity, and that a person's worth was measured not by their wealth or influence, but by how they treated the most vulnerable among them. As a child, he watched his father help neighbors before they even asked for assistance, offering tools, time, or simply an ear for their worries. He remembered how his mother welcomed strangers into their home like family, making room at the table even when there wasn't enough to go around. Those early lessons carved something permanent into him. Humility wasn't weakness, and kindness wasn't naivety. They were strengths, the sort the world needed more of. One memory stayed with him more vividly than the rest. He was 10, walking home from school, when he saw a group of older boys teasing a younger kid for having worn out shoes. Without thinking, Francis stepped between them, shielding the boy with the quiet courage of someone who simply couldn't stand injustice. He didn't fight, he didn't yell, he just stood there, steady and calm, until the bullies gave up and walked away. Later that night, his father placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "In this life, always protect the people who can't protect themselves." That single sentence sat in his heart like a compass, guiding him through everything he would someday face. When he eventually became a judge, he carried those early lessons with him into a courtroom that had long been seen as a place of discomfort and fear. He decided his would be different. The courtroom, he often said, should be a place of dignity, not fear. And he meant it. Every person who stood before him, whether they were struggling single parents, immigrants unsure of the language, teenagers overwhelmed by life, or elderly drivers facing fines they couldn't afford, was met with patience, compassion, and a genuine desire to understand their story. His rulings became a blend of fairness and humanity, the kind that reminded people they were more than their mistakes. Over the years, countless moments captured on camera turned into proof of his character. There was the single mother he absolved when he learned she'd been working 3 jobs to survive. The elderly man he forgave after discovering he'd been driving to visit his cancer-stricken son. The immigrant father he encouraged, telling him he was proud of the sacrifices he'd made for his children. Clips of his kindness spread across the internet, creating a montage of hope in a world that often felt too harsh. People didn't just watch his decisions. They felt them, and on. And on through all the admiration, Caprio never changed. He remained steady, grounded, the moral center of a courtroom that had come to symbolize second chances and restored dignity. His wisdom wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It came from decades of seeing people, not as case numbers, but as lives filled with burdens, dreams and stories worth listening to. And on this day, all those decades of wisdom were about to be tested like never before. The moment Judge Caprio began outlining the charge, she cut him off with a sharp sigh, loud enough to echo through the courtroom. "Can we not drag this out?" she snapped, tapping her manicured nails against the podium like a metronome of impatience. Caprio continued, steady and unshaken. But she interrupted again, this time with a laugh that felt like an insult more than a reaction. "Seriously? This is what we're doing today? Over a parking ticket? You've got to be kidding." A low wave of murmurs rippled through the benches. People leaned forward, exchanging looks of disbelief. A few angled their phones discreetly, screens dimmed, recording the moment they sensed might turn into something bigger. They had watched countless defendants stand where she stood, many of them nervous, respectful, grateful for the judge's kindness. But this was something else entirely. Her tone had crossed from casual arrogance into open mockery, and the shift was impossible to ignore. Judge Caprio tried again to explain the violation, but she rolled her eyes so dramatically it was almost theatrical. "Look, I don't have time for a lecture," she said, waving him off. "Just tell me the number so I can make it disappear." The dismissive flick of her wrist drew a few gasps. No one had ever spoken to him like that, not here, not in this room that felt more like a sanctuary than a court. Still, Caprio remained composed, though the tension settled around him like a tightening rope. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but firm enough to remind her, or at least attempt to, that she was standing before a judge, not a servant. "Young lady," he began, "I will explain the charge, and you will have your opportunity to speak." She smirked, leaning back with the smug ease of someone who believed she controlled the moment. "Yeah," she said under her breath, just loud enough. "Sure I will." The room stiffened. Officers shifted subtly. A woman in the back whispered, "Oh, she's pushing it." Even the air seemed to hold still, waiting for the next move. Caprio's patience was deep, but the disrespect was escalating, each remark slicing closer to a line she didn't even know existed. But the moment she crossed the line, the room felt the shift, and the mic drop was coming. It happened so fast the courtroom almost didn't have time to register it. Judge Caprio was mid-sentence, outlining the details of the citation with his usual calm clarity. When she leaned forward, eyebrows lifted, lips curled in a smirk that looked rehearsed. "Oh my God, this is ridiculous," she said, letting out a loud, mocking laugh that bounced off the walls. "You're seriously wasting my time with this? A parking ticket.
Ow.
Please. You're what, like 80? Should you even still be making these decisions?" Her voice carried a sting, sharpened by entitlement. A few people audibly inhaled. She wasn't done. "Do you even understand how these things work anymore? Honestly, it's embarrassing. Just give me the fine and let me go. My father will clean it up in 5 seconds." She flicked her hair over her shoulder and added the line she should never have said. "Do you even know who my father is?" Her words landed like a slap across the courtroom. The soundscape shifted instantly. Benches creaked as people straightened. Someone whispered, "No way." Phones that had been recording cautiously were now lifted a fraction higher. Even the officers seemed to freeze for a beat. The arrogance wasn't new. People had seen bits of it online, but hearing it unfold in real time, in Caprio's courtroom of all places, felt surreal. A woman in the back placed a hand over her mouth. A man near the aisle shook his head, muttering, "She's gone too far." The room seemed to exhale all at once, and then fall into an uneasy silence thick enough to press against the walls. It felt cinematic, almost scripted, except every person watching knew this was real, unfiltered, about to turn into something unforgettable. Judge Caprio didn't rise. He didn't snap. He didn't return her insults with anger. Instead, He paused, a long, steady pause that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft enough to make the silence lean in. "Young lady," he began, each word placed with precision, "age gives us something power never will: perspective." She blinked, the smirk slipping just a little. He continued, still calm, still unwavering. "I may be older than you," he said, "but I have spent a lifetime listening to people who work hard, people who struggle, people who face consequences even when it's inconvenient." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much to be rattled by a spoiled insult. "You ask if I know who your father is," he went on, eyes steady on hers, "but I'm far more concerned with who you choose to be." The line floated through the room like a gentle thunderclap. A few murmurs stirred. She shifted her weight, that easy confidence beginning to flicker. Caprio continued, each sentence chipping away at the veneer she had wrapped herself in. He spoke of responsibility, not as punishment, but as a form of growth. Of humility, not as surrender, but as strength. Of consequences, not as weapons, but as reminders that we are all accountable for the ways we move through the world. Privilege, he said, is not a shield from character. And character is revealed most clearly when we're asked to face what we'd rather ignore. As he spoke, the room transformed. Her eyes darted around, searching for support that wasn't there. The smirk dissolved. Her jaw clenched. The flush on her cheeks deepened. People watched the shift with a mix of fascination and disbelief, not because they were rooting against her personally, but because it was the first time anyone had ever seen her confronted without excuses, without escape routes, without her father's shadow to hide behind. The armor she had worn so effortlessly suddenly looked fragile, cracking at the edges. By the time Caprio reached the end of his measured dismantling, the daughter's posture had changed completely. Her shoulders weren't pulled back anymore. They had tightened inward. Her eyes no longer held that bored, amused glaze. They were focused now, uncertain, almost defensive. For the first time, she looked like someone realizing that she wasn't in control of this moment, that her script no longer applied. The courtroom felt that shift, like a collective heartbeat. This was accountability in real time. It was landing harder than anyone expected. Then came the ruling, the moment the entire room felt tightening like a drum roll. Judge Caprio folded his hands, leaning forward just slightly. "Here's what will happen," he said, voice still warm but unyielding. "You will pay the fine in full. Not because of who you are, but because of the choices you made." She swallowed, the sound small but audible. "You will perform community service," he continued, "to better understand the people who work hard, day after day, without the luxury of dismissing their responsibilities." A few nods rippled through the room. And then the final requirement. "You will apologize to every court officer you disrespected this morning," he said, directly, sincerely. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but Caprio gently raised a hand, not to command silence, but to hold the moment steady. And then he delivered the line that would replay across social media for days, become a headline, a soundbite, a cultural moment. "Respect," he said, "is not something your father can legislate for you. It's something you must earn." The words didn't just hit her. They hit everyone watching inside the courtroom and behind the screens soon to follow. They carried the weight of truth spoken with grace. A reminder that dignity still mattered in a world that often forgot it. But the fallout was only beginning. By the time the courthouse doors closed behind her, the moment was already escaping into the world like a spark looking for dry grass. Someone in the gallery uploaded the first clip within minutes, and it spread with a speed that felt almost radioactive. On TikTok, creators layered dramatic music beneath the moment her face fell. Twitter filled with freeze frames of Caprio's steady expression, an expression that somehow it's blended kindness with unshakable authority. Hashtags rose like a tide. Hashtag humbled, hashtag Caprio moment, hashtag respect wins. Even people who had never stepped foot in Rhode Island were suddenly debating what real accountability should look like in a country exhausted by double standards. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Some creators laughed, Some cheered. Some treated Caprio's speech like a public service announcement the nation had been waiting for. A few educators stitched a clip, pointing out how humility isn't just a value, it's a survival skill. Teenagers reposted it as if it were a new trend, typing captions like, "This is how you handle entitlement," and "Wish my school had a Caprio." Even celebrities joined in, sharing the clip with fire emojis, applause, or one-liners like, "This is leadership." Then came the news cycle. Morning shows played the footage on loop, dissecting every detail, the daughter's smirk. The moment her confidence cracked, the line that made anchors pause mid-sentence. Political commentators who rarely agree on anything found themselves nodding in rare harmony. It wasn't about ideology. It was about watching a powerful man's child encounter fairness for the first time. Commentators spoke about a national hunger for sincerity, for justice that feels real instead of curated, and then, inevitably, the senator spoke. His statement was carefully worded, polished to a shine by advisors who probably stayed up all night. He praised the important role of the judicial system and the value of personal growth. But the public could feel the tension beneath every sentence. He never apologized for her behavior, yet he couldn't defend it. His political opponents seized the moment with subtle jabs, nothing overt, just enough to suggest that character still matters. Even in the halls of power, while all this unfolded, the daughter found herself facing a storm she never expected. Her classmates shared the clip in group chats. Old acquaintances resurfaced to mock her attitude. Every corner of her online life filled with reminders of the moment she lost control of the narrative. For someone used to living above consequences, the weight of public scrutiny hit like a sudden drop in altitude. She wasn't just dealing with trolls, she was facing a mirror she could no longer avoid. But even with the viral chaos, the outrage, the memes, and the think pieces, something deeper was happening in living rooms and classrooms across the country. Parents showed the clip to their kids. Teachers played it before discussions about respect. Community organizers used it as an example of what fair accountability looks like when power doesn't distort the scale. And all the while, people waited for what Judge Caprio would say next. Because the moment wasn't fully over. The ruling had landed, the clip had exploded, and the nation had taken sides. But everyone knew Caprio wasn't a man who let a teachable moment float away. Unfinished, and the lesson wasn't complete. Not until Caprio delivered one final message. A few days later, Judge Caprio stepped in front of the cameras not to defend himself or the courtroom, but to speak to the nation in a way only he could. His tone was measured, calm, carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed the fragility of character and the resilience of conscience in equal measure. What happened in that courtroom, he said, wasn't about a parking ticket. It was about the lessons we sometimes learn too late and the values we are called to uphold every single day. He spoke of humility and how it cannot be inherited, bought, or legislated. Privilege is not a right to disregard others. Humility is what keeps us grounded, what allows us to understand the lives of those who do not share our advantages. His words painted a picture of responsibility not as punishment, but as a pathway to growth, an opportunity to become better than we were yesterday. He emphasized that respect, too, is earned, not commanded. Power alone is meaningless if it is not paired with dignity and consideration for those around us, Caprio reminded viewers that service outweighs entitlement. We are all part of a larger society, he said. Every choice we make affects others, whether we realize it or not. True leadership, true greatness, comes from lifting others, not from sheltering ourselves behind our titles or our wealth. His voice carried conviction. But it was also warm, inviting reflection rather than commanding compliance. Across living rooms and offices, viewers felt the echo of a truth they recognized instinctively yet rarely witnessed expressed so plainly. He framed it as a universal American truth. Justice must be equal, even when it is uncomfortable. The lesson transcended political affiliations, transcended social divides. Everyone who watched could see the principles laid bare. Character is tested not when it's easy, but when it's inconvenient. when it demands honesty, courage, and moral clarity. Caprio's closing words struck the final chord of this story. Greatness doesn't come from who your parents are or what name you carry. It comes from the choices you make when no one is watching, and how you treat others when the world offers you the chance to rise above yourself. For viewers who had followed the saga from the courtroom to social media chaos, from viral outrage to this quiet moral reflection, it was a crescendo that left them inspired, thoughtful, and challenged to consider their own paths in that moment. The lesson landed fully. Dignity, respect, and service are not privileges. They are obligations. And the measure of a life is found in how faithfully we honor them. The story that unfolded in Judge Caprio's courtroom was more than a viral moment. It was a reminder of the timeless truths that shape our society. The senator's daughter, accustomed to a world without consequences, learned firsthand that privilege cannot substitute for character. And in that lesson, the nation saw the enduring power of humility, respect, and service. This wasn't just a parking ticket, and it wasn't just a courtroom confrontation. It was a mirror held up to all of us, reflecting what it means to act with integrity when no one is forcing us to. If you believe dignity still matters, if you believe that respect is earned rather than inherited, then this story is for you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that life has rules that apply to everyone regardless of wealth, status, or influence. Let this viral moment spark conversations, ignite reflection, and inspire action in homes, classrooms, and communities everywhere. By witnessing this clash of entitlement and integrity, viewers are reminded that true leadership isn't about titles or power, it's about moral clarity, calm authority, and the courage to stand for what is right. Judge Caprio showed us that enforcing fairness with compassion is not weakness. It is strength, and it resonates far beyond the walls of a single courtroom. So take this lesson with you. Let it shape the way you approach the challenges, injustices, and opportunities in your own life. And remember, the impact of one person's choices can ripple across a nation, turning a moment of confrontation into a beacon of hope, because in Judge Caprio's courtroom and in life character,